Hello and welcome to this new episode of Josh's Car Corner. This is the second episode that will be covering my trip to Australia. And the title being The Status of Holden Today might make you wonder why I'm recording in my car present day. Well, it's because I have to give a little backstory here. So as I'm sure we all know by now, Holden is no longer producing cars in Australia and has not been producing cars in Australia since the end of October 2017. Now, before the factory got shut down, there were attempts made by GM to keep the Holden factory going. GM was in negotiations with the Australian government to keep the plant open for an additional 10 years because all they were really making in the plant in Australia was the Cruise, a local version of the Cruise, and the Commodore, and variants of it being, those variants being the Utes. But they were all on the old Zeta platform, and GM had retired the Zeta platform. That's what the Camaro started on when it was brought back, but they had already moved the Camaro onto the Cadillac ATS Sigma platform, and Holden was the only one still using the Zeta platform. So in order to keep making cars into the future, the whole factory was going to have to be retooled and refitted to make Commodores on the new Sigma platform. And there was also possibility that they were going to make a new two-door version of the Commodore, a new Monaro, or at the very least, a right-hand drive version of the Camaro, because it was also on the Sigma platform. GM went to the government to make their pitch to keep the plant open. They wanted to keep it open for an additional 10 years, but they did want a concession from the Australian government. That concession being they wanted a $300 million tax credit over those 10 years. Now, to put that in perspective, GM corporate, the whole GM enterprise, makes easily more than $300 million every month. So in their terms, it's not asking for a lot of money. And the gross domestic product of the country of Australia in 2018 was 1.3 trillion Australian dollars. So $300 million to them is not even a drop in the bucket. It's less than 1/10,000th of a percent. But the government said no. They weren't going to give GM this 10-year, $300 million tax credit. And because they basically waved their finger at GM and said, shame on you guys, we're not going to do it, GM decided instead it was not cost effective to keep Holden open to make cars that were only going to be sold in Australia, and the plant got shut down. And that is why we have no more Holdens being produced today. Sad story. It runs similar to the story of Pontiac when you think about it. A government saying no to GM and production and a brand having to be killed. Now, it's been 17 months since that all went down, and when you go to Australia, you will see Holdens left, right, and center. You will see Commodores, you will see Utes, you will see cars to beat the band everywhere, including the versions that aren't necessarily made in Australia or produced in China or Germany. However, the effect this has had on the dealerships has been massive. Even though cars are still sold under the Holden flag, they're all produced overseas. And Australians, just like us, are very Australia first. They want to buy Australian-made products and aren't too keen on these new ones. And GM also had the bad decision-making to bring back the Commodore name on the Buick Regal, or elsewhere known in the world, the Opel Insignia, and call it the ZB Commodore. And most people don't like it. And even though we saw them on the road, we certainly didn't see as many of them on the road as we did Commodores. And I'm talking about just VF series Commodores. There were way more VF Commodores than there were the new ZB platform. And the effect this has had on the dealerships, because no one really wants to buy Holden anymore, is drastic. So my friend James took me to what in 2017 was the largest Holden dealership in Sydney. It's called Sutton City Holden. It was a dealership that takes up a 3-acre lot. And to put that in perspective, because Sydney is an old city and it's got a lot of close-knit buildings and tight streets, dealerships are usually, at least within the city, built into buildings, and their storefronts are just the windows on the front of a building, and dealerships are relatively small. So having a 3-acre dealership is a big deal. That's a big space. And in 2017, it was nothing but Holdens, 3 acres worth. And as you are about to find out, that's not the case anymore. So check out this story, kind of sad. So where we're walking right now all used to be a Holden dealer. There was no Kia, there was no Honda, no Mitsubishi, no Renault, no Hyundai. This was all a Holden dealership. And then after Holden shut down, they closed down everything, emptied the dealership, emptied the inside, and put all these other brands on the lot. And the only new Holden cars that we see anymore, Commodores or like it, are secondhand. So, and we're walking down to them right now, but it's just gonna take a while because there's that few of them. They do put them out front at least so you can see them from the street. And we finally get there. So we have right here, this is a Senator. So this is a luxury version. They have this one and they have this last one, an HSV. This is a Gen F VF2 Club Sport. And we know that because it has this HSV 30 plaque on it for 30-year anniversary. Club Sport along the bottom. So this would be one of the last ones produced. It's an R8 with an LSA on board. So this right here is one of the last HSV cars, and it's for sale. They don't have a price listed. Do they have any statistics right here? They have fuel consumption numbers, which will not be good. And it'll all be in liters per 100 kilometers, which we don't really understand. This one is another Senator? SV6. So we never got this because we only got the LS3, but this is a Commodore SV6 version, Series 2, so it's VF2, 6-speed auto. So this would just be an entry-level one, and this would probably go for a lot less than that ups model Senator would go for. You might find me weird, but I love the wagon so much. VFSS Redline Wagon is another one we've seen here. Has this one got a manual? No, it's automatic. Oops. But it's VF Series 2. So again, this will be one of the last ones. Oof. An R8 325. I know what that means. I've seen that before. This right here is a base model. Couldn't get any more basic. This is a Commodore Evoque. Evoque is the entry-level model. Nothing fancy at all. This will have probably the 3-liter V6, maybe the 3.6. It's very standard though. Small wheels, small brakes, Spartan interior, nothing fancy at all. Over here we've got an actual Commodore SSV. I saw the badge across the way. I know this is what a lot of guys in the States do. With the diffuser, all black. Very nice interior, good leather. And this has also got that LS3 badge, which you guys in the States with SSs, you need to start getting that badge if you want to be correct. Looks like we got a VE Commodore over here, which would be a pretty basic one. It's got the SIDI, so it's going to have a 3.6. The Commodore International. See, they had so many different variants of these cars. It's a lot like Dodge with their Chargers and Challengers. They make 7 or 8 variants of the same car. Basic on the inside. This one's been used quite a bit. And then over here is another long wheelbase one. This is a Caprice. Caprices are the long wheelbase. This is like the cop car. This is a Caprice V. So they didn't really make a performance version of this. HSV did, according to James, and they called it the Grange. Oh, like Grange, like LaGrange, the ZZ Top song. But this was supposed to be more of an executive car. Long wheelbase, more of a luxury cruiser. So Caprices and Statesmans tended to be up spec, up level, nice interior. You could get V8. A lot of them have V8s, but wasn't intended to be a performance car from Holden. And just another SS Ute over here. So this is just a standard SS Ute, not an SSV, not a Maloo, it's not HSV. This is a VY Series 2 SS. So this should have a V8. Yep, it's got the V8. And the front, you will recognize quite a bit. The headlights are a little bit different, but this is where the GTO came from. This is the platform. Got another in this alchemy purple. Looks like another basic VF. Another international. Yep, it's got the antenna that comes up.
It's got it had these style wheels on it. That was called Delft Blue, and the interior is totally different.
This is a VX Series 1. This is the first Monaro. So look right here, look where the gas cap is. It's because the tank is actually under the car. I found out the reason we have our tanks in the trunk is because to make dual exhaust happen, they had to move the tank. So that's why we have the tank in the trunk taking up all the space. And he says the interior is completely different. Oh yeah, and look at the buttons on the steering wheel. They're completely different. The center cluster there is different. Let's see if we can see through here. The seats, the bolstering is a little different. Yeah, the center stack is completely different. I don't know if you can see that. But yeah, it's all different. And this is where it started. So 2001 or 2002, this probably would have been. We looked for a pair of GTO fog lights for a friend of mine who has an HSV GTO in the States, and he needs the fog lights and the grills. They can't get us the grills, but we might be able to get the fog lights for him. And this is what's in here. This is all that's left. These awesome posters on the wall. The evolution of Holden going back from the 60s all the way beyond 2000. There's even some Mopar stuff in there, because I think they do Dodge now. And more Mopar stuff. The Holden story right here. I think it's only goes up to about the 80s or early 90s. That's pretty cool. Penrite is the oil of choice in Australia. And all these models, these are all different. Most of these are Holdens. There's some Hondas in here and whatnot, but this is crazy stuff. Bunch of different versions of HSVs, all VEs. This is some older stuff from the 70s, 60s. I think that one's early 60s right there, that little guy. The W427, that's a rare one. It's very cool. There's a couple more down here worth mentioning. We go down here, there's this orange one. Another HSV. This is a GTS R. This is the second hottest version they ever made, the hottest version being the GTS R W1. So this thing is pretty sick. I love the color. He's debadged it except for the GTS R on the back. And all HSVs apparently come with that sticker, the I Just Want One sticker, which I love. Next to it's another VE Ute. It's a VESS over here. Don't know if it's Series 1 or 2. But yeah, this thing is top notch. I love it. Look at those aggressive wheels. That's such a sick wheel, and massive, massive brakes. And they're two-piece brakes. Those are two-piece rotors in there too. That's just what you got. So this is what's left of your standard Holden dealership. Most of the dealerships, he tells me, are gone and or disappearing, or are very, very small and only sell a handful of cars. All that Holden really sells anymore is sport utes and pickup trucks. They don't sell utes anymore. This is all that's left of them. Most Holden dealers actually are combined with other brands because they're not big enough anymore to stand on their own, which is pretty sad. So that is the state of Holden in Australia today. Obviously, no more new Commodores are being produced except for that ZB that nobody really likes. No more V8 models, no more Utes. That whole market has been retired because Ford pulled out too. Ford doesn't make the Falcon, so they don't make their version of the Ute. All they sell now is there's about a dozen different manufacturers making mid-sized trucks, and since Holden and Ford aren't making Utes anymore, they've kind of usurped that name, and they call these mid-sized trucks utes. And there's no one to object because there isn't anything that Australians would consider utes anymore. And what's kind of sad about it is granted, these days you drive around the streets of Australia and you will see Holdens left, right, and center, Commodores, utes, the occasional Monaro. But 10 years from now, half of them will probably be gone. And another 10 years after that, almost all of them will probably be gone. That's why I think it is important for us to help the Australians in preserving this great badge and these great cars that were generated. The ones that we got, the GTO, the G8, the Caprice PPV, the SS. It's beholden on us, pardon the pun, to keep our versions of the cars up and running and help preserve this Australian heritage, because believe it or not, Australians love their muscle cars, and they also love American muscle cars just as much. The one car I saw in mass that wasn't an Australian car was the Ford Mustang, because Ford did have the smart sense to turn the Mustang into a world car. So they sell it in left-hand drive, right-hand drive, and you can get it in Australia for $50,000, very reasonable price with a V8 engine, and as a result of that, we saw them everywhere. GM, for whatever reason, not so smart, never made a right-hand drive version of the Sigma platform, so you can't have a right-hand drive direct from Chevy. Although HSV, all they do now is convert imported Chevrolets, the two being the Camaro and the Silverado, and they convert them to right-hand drive. But by the time they're done doing it, they're so expensive that most people either can't afford them or don't want them. They'd rather just slip right into a Mustang that's already right-hand drive from the dealer, doesn't have to have anything special done to it, and they buy those instead. Lots of mistakes were made by GM, by the Australian government, and as a result of that, Holden, as we know it, is no more. And considering the sales of all their other cars are so lackluster, it's a wonder if GM will even continue the brand beyond 2020, maybe to 2025. Most Australians on the whole aren't interested in them because they're not Australian built. Although, to be fair, no car you can buy in Australia anymore is Australian built because Ford pulled out too. But they feel betrayed because Holden was produced in Australia and it is an Australian namesake. And to put it on cars that aren't produced in Australia, they find to be an insult. And I can't say that I blame them. So now you know that story. It's a little long-winded, I admit. Apologies for that, but it is sad. But I feel it's a story worth being told, and I'm hoping it resonates in a few years, because I want to get this idea out here that we are just as responsible for preserving these great cars as the Australians are. So we've got to make sure that we keep our copies of them in good condition, keep them pristine, and more importantly, keep them on the road. So until then, thanks for watching Josh's Car Corner, and we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching the show. If you like the show, let me know by clicking that subscribe button, and you can always follow what's going on with the show on Instagram at Josh's Car Corner.